And welcome to our daily space weather video fields and features segment. Looking at all kinds of things like coronal holes, sunspots, magnetism. Here's Earth's magnetic moment from space. It's our geospace magnetosphere movie showing magnetohydrodynamic pressure in nanopascals as modeled by the Space Weather Modeling Framework. If you want to read about that, click on the Details tab at the bottom of this Geospace Magnetosphere Movies page. You'll have a link to the Space Weather Modeling Framework there. You can read all about the variables used to create the model. Most pressure on the magnetotail side, not the sun side of the planet. Here's our GOES magnetometer over the past 3 days. Earth is in a North Pole current sheet. We'll get to that in a moment. First, Earth's magnetic moment from the ground, modeled in nanotesla, based on the same Space Weather Modeling Framework, but at the ground level as opposed to in space. Ground magnetic perturbations, geospace delta B, changes to Earth's B field. When you see a triangle or the word delta in science data, folks, it means change in. If you're a science noob, you may not know that. Delta B, changes in Earth's B field, the field that goes through the magnet in this case being the Earth. So some magnetic pulses coming out of the West Pacific there, but pretty minor stuff. Following Sunday's significant geomagnetic storm, coronal mass ejection strike, we covered it pretty much before everybody else. Next, looking at the real-time solar wind and the most comprehensive space weather on the internet, at least in a daily context, right here on our channel. Real-time solar wind data showing solar wind density a bit diffuse here, only 4.28 protons per cubic centimeter. Solar wind speed only 366 kilometers per second. So a pretty slow and diffuse solar wind at the moment. Next, looking at the heliospheric current sheet, and I would expect some changes to this coming soon, or some new sunspots in the southern hemisphere. So we're seeing this North Pole current sheet in which the Earth currently resides. So this green area right here, there's your North Pole current sheet. Over here, your South Pole current sheet. Again, Earth is in a North Pole current sheet. I would expect it to change promptly. Here's a line of sight view. You can see this blue line dipping way down toward the southern polar region. I think we're going to see some sunspots in the southern hemisphere coming soon. Not based on statistical analysis, based on magnetohydrodynamic analysis. Here is your line of sight coronal hole plot showing the sun's B field in blue. South Pole-oriented coronal holes in red here rotating to the west. Green North Pole-oriented coronal holes here rotating in from the east. As solar cycle 25 progresses. And here's some great imagery. There was a coronal mass ejection. We're going to cover that in a minute. Great view of this filamentary eruption here in 193 angstroms. We're mainly showing it to show the coronal holes, though. So let's scroll down. This is yesterday and all of today. By the way, happy St. Patrick's Day. Are you wearing green? Are you wearing orange? Or are you wearing both as a show of religious solidarity? So there, a great view of the coronal holes. This is a North Pole-oriented coronal hole. This is the South Solar Polar coronal hole. Kind of taking its good old time to make its migration toward the north throughout solar cycle 25. Next, we'll move on to sunspots. Likelihood of large flares still significant. Sunspot 2965 remains beta-gamma class. It's still certainly capable. This area here needs a name. It's Sunspot 2971. Maybe it hasn't had umbre long enough to get a name yet, but I was pretty sure it was by yesterday morning. More than deserving of a name. That's Sunspot 2971. Let's just call it. Again, we can expect to see some activity rising or just forming in the southern hemisphere. Here's your solar intensity gram. Existing sunspots remained mostly stable. That is the data from all of yesterday and today so far. So pretty stable sunspots there. Not a lot of changes. Looks like a little bit of reduction of umbral size there on the leading umbre of Sunspot 2965. Not a lot to comment on there. Continuing on to flares. Here's the flare profile over the past 3 days. And we've actually seen the X-ray profile come down a bit. So we did see one C-class intensification that was at about 150 was the peak flux. Just a C a C1 class flare there. Proton flux is getting back to baseline levels here, following a small proton event. Nothing too exciting there. KP index at 2. That's a measurement of global geomagnetism for you new viewers. Planetary K index KP2. Geomagnetic calm conditions. Here's a solar system forecast. It looks like it was full moon. Let us know if you have any security cam video of werewolves or cannibals. Let's advance this 1 week. Here's where things will be in a week. We're only 3 days from the spring equinox. We'll be streaming live for it on YouTube. Next, a star chart. A bunch of planets in the morning. If you're up before dawn, you may see Mars, Venus, Saturn, Mercury, and Jupiter all rising ahead of the sun. It's quite a spectacular time for morning planet viewing. Get up before dawn. Check it out. That's our star chart, our all-sky chart from in-the-sky.org. Also, make sure you follow us on Twitter if you don't yet do so. You'll see all kinds of exclusive content that you won't see anyplace else because we share tweets by retweeting them, of course. So thanks to our Twitter followers. If you don't have a Twitter account, set one up. I don't care who's been banned. We're not going to get banned. So follow us there. If you enjoy the content on YouTube, press like and subscribe. Thanks to everybody who's done so. Please press share as well, as we don't seem to think the algorithms are helping. We're also on BitChute. We've got 666 subscribers on BitChute. Thanks to our BitChute subscribers. We've been putting our meteorology segments on BitChute exclusively. And let's go into coronal mass ejections by looking at stereo A and the LASCO C3. So we've paused this here at 2030 approximately, because this may look like an Earth-directed coronal mass ejection, but it isn't. So at 2030, you can see this CME on stereo A is well off the Earth line. Earth would be about on this line here, off to the right of stereo A, and this CME right here is not earthly directed. However, we have a CME going off on the opposite side of the sun as well, and that is what makes it look like a halo ejection. So this is not an Earth-directed CME, a prime example of how deceptive it can be when you only have stereo A and the LASCO C3. You've got to use some deductive reasoning there. Not an Earth-directed coronal mass ejection. Let's let it play through. So some great imagery there regardless. Some fireworks in the form of solar coronal plasma blasting out into the greater solar system. Once again, stereo A is located here at Lagrange point 5. The SOHO LASCO C3 located here at Lagrange point 1. So thanks for tuning in to our in-depth solar data segment. I've been your host, Dan, a.k.a. Smash-O-Mash, signing off from the Smash News Network, least busted name in news. And may that solar wind be at your back.